Races here. Starting now. Hello, welcome everyone to this webinar. My name is Mark Takata. I am the Adobe Technical Evangelist for ColdFusion. And today we're going to be talking about running Adobe ColdFusion in containers on Google Cloud Platform. So a lot of you might be aware or familiar with running ColdFusion in containers. But I'm going to kind of go over some of it because I know some people are not familiar with it. They might not know exactly how to get through it. And there's lots of more detailed information out there, including by my friend Charlie here. He's done a few great talks and great presentations on using CF and Docker. So I'm just going to kind of go over it fairly lightly. ColdFusion's been in been in containers for a while, but only last year did we finally put it into Docker Hub and AWS ECR, which is the more standardized way of going around and pulling these container images. And since we've put them in, we've had over 500,000 downloads. So obviously, you are all excited about it. You're using it. People are using it in containers. So we figured, hey, let's talk about how to do it in yet another cloud platform. So let's talk to start with a little bit about CF Docker, because I've had some of my friends who are longtime ColdFusion developers just have all kinds of problems getting it running. And this is kind of an amusing thing that happens to literally everyone that I know. You know, you install Docker Desktop, that's easy. Docker pull Adobe ColdFusion / ColdFusion 2023 or latest, or however you want to pull it. Docker run, and then it blows up. Oh, error, right? EULA must be accepted. So it doesn't run kind of like right out of the box the way that you would imagine. It's not like, you know, double click, install, click through a bunch of things and it works, right? So there are a few things that you do need to add in when running in Docker. But also when you switch to using your own code, the way that you do those things also changes a little bit. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that just to get you able to run things locally in your own Docker, just to start out, get a feel for it. And then we'll move on from there, and I'll show you how to do some of the individual workloads in Google Cloud Platform as well. So what are those things that you need to get it running in your local environment? Well, except EULA is the big one, because if you don't do that, nothing, like literally nothing works. And so essentially what you need to end up doing is, you know, you'll do Docker run and the container, and you'll want to add a variable to it that's an environmental variable. So env is kind of the way that that's referred to. And the way that you do that in CF or in Docker, when you do the Docker run, is it's -e. That identifies something as an environmental variable, and then you just do space, except EULA is equal to yes, and you're off to the races. Like, that will get you through that particular hurdle. Now, you also need to do some things with ports. And let me step back a little bit and try to maybe even go a little bit lower for folks that don't really know what Docker is, because that's a question. Oh, it's like a VM, right? It's like a virtualized environment. It's like, you know, something that I've used for a long time. Why is Docker such a big deal? So yes, but no is the answer to that. And I'll tell you the big difference, the thing that's the identifier between VMs and between containers, in this case, Docker. So VMs virtualize the hardware of your system, right? So they provide a place for an operating system to exist, to interact with, and you can have multiple VMs inside of one physical hardware space, right? Because what they're doing is they're on top of it, they're abstracting it, and they're providing a place for an operating system to run at, right? Docker actually goes one step further, and it abstracts and virtualizes the operating system layer, right? So you could, in theory, and later in reality, we're going to do it, you could have a Docker container running inside of a VM. So you're abstracting the OS that's then running on something that's abstracting the hardware. So good times, right? Not confusing at all. Easy. So that's really the difference between the two. And if you kind of keep that in mind, some of this makes more sense, right? If you're abstracting that layer, well, you need to know how to get into it. It needs to know how to route your traffic, right? So one of the things you need to add is the dash P. Um, uh, Basically, like you're adding a variable and saying what is the port that's coming in and what is that port being mapped to. So in most cases, when you run ColdFusion, it's on port 8500. And so what you could do is theoretically run it and just say, you know, if something comes in on port 8500, go ahead and route to port 8500. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? Now, of course, that's not going to get you there just by going to a site. You'd have to do some mapping with port 80. And depending on what environment you're in, it's going to change the way that you actually do that. Like some of the environments just kind of automatically do a little bit of your mapping. Some of them do it with a little bit of work, and some of them make you want to drink paint. And we'll be doing all of them today. Now, if you want to learn about all of these different options from our help stuff, you can jump into our helpx page, which is listed there using Docker images. Apologies for like the incredibly long page, but there's a lot of info on there, including all of the different environmental variables, as well as some samples. Right. Okay. So if you were to go and do that and go and get a container that's running, in fact, I could just go ahead and do that if we want. So let me go ahead and jump in here. And I am just going to go ahead and just very basically go and start up something in Docker. So let me first show you. So this is Docker Desktop, by the way, and it's a free download. It's free to use. You can go and download it, install it. It's a great way to run containers locally and kind of play with the workload. So as you can see, I'm in Docker Desktop. There are no containers currently running. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go ahead and say Docker pull Adobe ColdFusion 2023, as you saw in my little cartoon with Gru there. Right. So what that does is that goes out to Docker Hub and it pulls the image for Adobe ColdFusion 2023 down. But now what, right? Like now what do you do? So at this point, what most people do is they'll just say Docker run /p 8500 fusion, and it's going to explode into terrible, terrible pieces, right? Because I didn't accept the EULA. But if I accept the EULA like this, now it's actually going to go through, and you can see there's some little points here that are showing up, like the serial key not provided. So it's actually going to run in developer mode. It's going to go through and say, previous serial key is not there. All of these things are going to get set up, and you can see the web root being set to app is something we're going to talk about here in just 1 second. But once this is actually running, what I'll do is I'll show you that it's going and it's running and it's actually doing things. So hold on. While it's doing that, let's see. Oh, John Barrett is here. Hi, John. Okay, so this is starting up. Awesome. All right, so theoretically, if I were to go to so you see me doing it live, I'm not faking this. If I go to localhost 8500, you'll see that this is ColdFusion basically running. Now you're like, but wait, it didn't render any pages, right? It didn't render any code. Well, you're right, because there is no code. This is literally just the server running. Now, if I wanted to prove to you that I'm actually running CF and it's actually going here, I can go to the administrator, and the administrator will come up, and you'll see that it's actually here in a minute. It's got to do a little bit of compiling, but there you are. So there you go. Put in my password. By the way, I didn't put in a password. You might have noticed that. And so the default password when you just don't put anything in is just admin. So admin. So don't do that. especially in production or anything that you can get to from the outside. This is my local machine. So the only one that could hack me is me. And I'm a nice guy, so I'm not going to do that. So here we go. This is ColdFusion 2023 running locally in Docker at port 8500. So there you go. Cool. But that's not that useful. I mean, it is useful, but what we really want to do is we want to use our own code. We want to use code that's running in ColdFusion and then preview that code and be able to see it. So what we're going to do is we're going to do what's called using a Docker file, right? And a Docker file is a very, very simple thing. Here's what it looks like, basically, right? So it has a couple of things in here. One is the from tag, right? So basically what this is saying is this is the base image that you're going to be using when you create your Docker image that you're going to start, run, build, whatever. That is the base image. And then what you're going to do is you're going to copy, and they use dot a lot, like a lot. It's annoying. Often they use dot, and you can miss it very easily when you're looking up at documentation, especially when your vision is as bad as mine. You're going to copy what is in the current directory, which here is actually it's my code that I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using one of my apps that I wrote to track my own running. And you're going to copy that to /app. Now, remember earlier, it set the working directory for ColdFusion to /app. So what that's going to do is going to take all of the code that you've got running and put it into that directory so it'll render. And then you'll notice the environmental variable is being put here versus passing it in using the Docker run command. So that is a difference here between the two. So okay, so what I've done here is we've created a Docker file. By the way, a Docker file is literally a file named Docker, no extension. And you can see in VS Code, it actually gets the little Docker whale icon. So it's aware of what it's actually looking at. I think I may have added something to do that, though. So don't quote me on that. But I think you do need to like install a Docker extension for it to be able to work with Docker files more easily. But at the end of the day, it's just a text file, so it doesn't really matter. So as you can see, there are other things you can do, by the way. So there's more environmental variables. If you go over to that helpx page, there's like a ton of stuff there that you can add in, including like installing modules. So that's one thing that you need to know. When you pull this image over, this is the most base ColdFusion install that we can provide. It's only like 147 megabytes, very small. And so to use it with your code, you will often have to install the modules that are required. And so you really want to figure out what those modules are, what those requirements are for your code, and just use those to make sure that your spin up speeds are acceptable, right? Because the more you add, the longer it takes for it to build, yada, yada, and compile and all that. Right. So all right, so I'm going to go ahead and do this right now. I'm going to build out. I'm going to build out my code. So you can see here, this is my folder. And the way that I do this, by the way, is I just go in here and I say open in terminal in the actual page, and I have PowerShell installed. Now, you can do this in other command lines. And by the way, Mac people, I'm sorry, I don't actually know exactly, like, I figure you use terminal, like whatever the terminal app is on Mac, but I use a PC. So you'll have to sort of do a little bit of researching exactly on how that works. But let me grab my cheat sheets here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say in this folder, that's what's important here. I'm going to say Docker build -t, which is going to tag this build with the name GCP demo app. So that's going to be the name of this image. And then very, very importantly, again, dot. That little dot can ruin your whole day if you don't put it in there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Oh, what did I do wrong? Hold on. Not sure what I did wrong on that, but there you go. I think I had a space in front of Docker. Sorry. So anyway, so that went in and it took the contents of that directory, which is just a little bit of ColdFusion code, and it built an image to use. And that image is using the GCP demo app name for the tag. And now what I can do is I can go ahead and just run this. Why is this not working? Oh, wait. There is something going on with my... Sorry, guys. I'm not sure why this is being difficult, but I am just going to go back to the one that worked. By the way, all of the stuff here in the memory is so gosh darn useful. Yeah, there we go. That looks exactly the same. PowerShell. My goodness. All right. So there you go. Docker run P80. So what I'm doing there that's a little bit different is I'm mapping port 80 to 8500 for this particular image, right? And as you remember, I mapped the code that was in the folder to /app, which is the working directory. So theoretically, if it decides to actually work, so it like installed things, it built things, it stopped it to restart. So like all the settings get set up. Now, if I go in and let me open up a new window. Let's see, checking server startup status. Should be working, hopefully. Let's go in here and make this a little bit smaller. If I go in here and just do localhost, there we go. Oh, wait, why is it sorry, it's restarting again. 1 second. I've not gotten much sleep over the last few days because it's been fun, like figuring out exactly what I added a new thing that I'm going to show you guys in terms of like where you can use Docker, and figuring all that out last night was a lot of SSHing into VMs, which I figured out I don't actually miss, but okay, that should be running. So theoretically, boom, if I hit localhost, there it is. It's my code. Look at the moose. It's so cute. There it is. So essentially what this code is, this is using GraphQL. This is actually my running club. So I'm part of a running club called Sloppy Moose, which is named after a tiny, cute, adorable little dog named Moose that gets together, and they use a Google Sheet on the front end to track all their runs. And unfortunately, that's not really easy to get to. So I wrote them a little app that goes out and uses GraphQL to go and check how many times I've checked in, because if you run 5 times, you get a t-shirt. If you run 50 times, you get like a really cool t-shirt. If you run 100 times, you get a hoodie. So people are very interested in how many times they've run because they want their swag, right? So anyway, so this is actually going to be the demo app that I'm going to be showing off in all of the different things. And here it is running on port 80 inside of a container in my local Docker. Very cool. All right, cool. So let me go through and just move some of this out of the way. So I went through, I did the build, note the dot, I did the Docker run. Now, really important here, and I want to shout out my buddy Charlie here. So there are other ways to do this. For example, Docker Compose. Docker Compose is another method by which you could do all of this kind of building together. And Charlie actually built an application to ease the creation of Docker Compose files. He's got a whole talk on it. I think he might have more than one, maybe. So that's outside of the scope of this talk, but definitely check that stuff out. Charlie, if you want to like drop your, if you want to drop a link to your talks and your that app on here, feel free. I did take a look at it before, and it's really, really cool. I just kind of wanted to do it this kind of base way. It's like the hard way, honestly, first, and then maybe do a talk on doing some of it in like Docker Compose later. So feel free to add that. All right, now this is the point at which I would normally ask my friend Aaron Rouse from Google to come in and tell you all about the wonders of GCP. But unfortunately, Aaron went and made himself important enough to get like pulled into a major project at Google where he's actually reporting his findings to the CEO. Fancy. So I'm stuck temporarily becoming a Google evangelist for a second. So CEO of Google, you owe me one. All right. So what can you do? How can you run containers in GCP? Any of you that are familiar with AWS know that AWS has something like, and I'm not even kidding, like 18 ways to run containers. It is capital R ridiculous how many ways you can do it. It's just like overwhelming. GCP is not like that. GCP really has, I mean, you could get pedantic and like there's options in some of these, and maybe you could like call those individual ways, but really there's 3 ways to run to run container workloads inside of GCP. And I'm going to cover all of them here and what they are, how they function, all that good stuff. So the 3 ways are really Cloud Run, Kubernetes Engine, also known as GKE, and container to VM, which is a very odd little animal that honestly I just sort of I put it in here just out of total curiosity because only a mad person would probably use this in anger. I don't know why I don't know what the use case would be for actually using this, but I'm going to show you because, gosh darn it, I want to be a completionist. And then, very important, especially for Cloud Run, is the artifact registry. And so there's an artifact registry that holds all of your container images. They also have something called GCRIO, which is another place. So artifact registry works with Cloud Run. Kubernetes Engine and container to VM will use this GCRIO alternate way of holding your containers. So lots of fun, not a lot of similarity between the two. It's a good time. All right, so what are the differences between these 3? Why do they have 3 different ones? Let's start with Cloud Run. So Cloud Run is stateless. It's serverless. And it's automatically scalable as big as your wallet happens to be. Okay. So what does that really mean? So what that means is it's a very interesting and unusual place to run workloads out of. Let's put it that way. When I say it's stateless, what I mean by that is literally when needed, it will spin up your ColdFusion. It will run the process that it needs to based on your request. So you put in a request to go get some data, push it to the screen, it'll do that. And then immediately will begin the process of going cold. So it won't turn off immediately, completely, but it will spin down CPUs. It'll like kind of like go, okay, I'm kind of going down. And then eventually that machine image will just poof, disappear. So what does that mean for you? If you use session variables, no, you don't, because they won't exist. Those session variables go away. You cannot trust that they will live more than, potentially 60, 90 seconds, unless you're doing something odd and weird to maintain that machine like going. And if you are, you're spending more money than you really need to. And you probably should be using GKE, right? So this is not for extended high load applications that are just being used for hours and hours and hours necessarily. Okay. That is correct. Now, Charlie makes a good point. You can store your session variables in an external store of some kind. So you could use Redis. And I've seen people actually, because they are coming from an environment where they're using load balancing, they're already kind of used to having to manage their sessions in a way that doesn't depend on an individual machine image or whatever. So it's similar in some ways to that. But the other thing to keep in mind, if you're storing anything in the server itself, you can't do that here. This server will not maintain any of the changes, any of the uploads, anything like that. It literally will go out and pull the image again and just, it'll kill it, raise it, kill it, raise it, kill it, raise it. So in some ways, it's kind of potentially like a Lambda. And that's all I'm going to say about that, so I don't get in trouble. Okay, so that's Cloud Run. What is Kubernetes Engine? So Kubernetes Engine is something that you might be more accustomed to when talking about containerized workloads. So the way Kubernetes Engine works is you create a cluster. So it's a place for your workload to sit, and you set that up with scaling that you can scale it up, scale it down, however you want to do that. And then you deploy workloads into that cluster, and it's managed by that cluster. So is it scalable? Yes, it is scalable. It can scale up and down, but a lot of that is controlled by you. So whereas Cloud Run, just by its very nature, pops in and out, and when there's a high load, it will just spawn a whole bunch of Cloud Run instances to handle the load and then spin back down. Kubernetes Engine, you have to sort of set those types of things up. So it's a little bit more front loaded in terms of knowing what your workflow is going to be like, what your workloads are going to be like, how many instances you need, what those instances look like, right? But for the most part, it's a more basic way, and it is the way really to run most loads, most containerized loads that you and I would be comfortable with. Like it's stateful. It's kind of just like running it on your local machine here. It's very similar to that. Now, there is some, and I wish Aaron was here because Aaron was trying to explain this to my thick head, and I wasn't quite figuring out how you would do it, but there are ways to do some more automatic spin up, spin down. I wouldn't say it's necessarily stateless so much, because what it does is it will actually spin down and let your CPUs go cold, which will reduce your monthly costs at the risk of then having a little bit of time lag when things are trying to spin back up. But what it doesn't do, which is the difference between Cloud Run and GKE, is it doesn't destroy the machine image completely. So you still get, the cluster is still there. Your workload is still set up the same way. Things aren't completely blown up and blown out. So yeah, that one I have not played with. So I'll be kind of showing you the stateful version of that. And then the final, the final one, again, this one is fun. So container to VM. Now you might be thinking, Mark, that's not unusual at all. I've installed Docker on a container and run stuff. Why is that weird? It's not actually what this is. Okay, so what this is it's actually using, if you've ever used VMs, you can choose an image to be placed on the VM, right? And you can create VMIs like with virtual machine images. That's a thing in AWS, right? So what Google has done is they've built a process by which you can send it a Docker image, and it will use that image, and it's almost as though it's unabstracting some of the pieces. So it will take that image and lay it onto the VM, and then it just becomes a VM running your stuff, which is, again, kind of odd. But also, I could see how someone would use this when they don't necessarily want to create and hold virtual machine images somewhere else and pull them in and store them and all that. If you're used to using containers and you have container images that you're using, okay, I could see it. Now, unfortunately, and we'll talk about this a little bit, and oh gosh, I'm halfway through my time. Yikes. You also get all of the bad things with VMs, unfortunately, and we will talk about some of the downsides of that. So I'm going to handle a quick question here. Daniel says, does the Docker image always contain the latest patch version of CF? Um, I would say ideally, yes. We do our best to try and make sure that if you do the latest version on it, it will have those patches in place. However, sometimes it does take us a minute to put things up there. We're trying to get better at that so that we're doing in parallel, pushing everything up. But definitely it's good to test and check and make sure that everything's up there. So we are trying to do that as much as possible. Now you can also pull down, like older versions, and you can pull down like CF 2021. And yeah. So what Charlie says, made available within days. And so as long as you use latest, it'll use the latest that's available, but that may not have, all of the things. If like literally we just dropped the update and you go and try to pull, it may not be there quite yet, because we do have to, we have to go and generate that and push it up, and it has to be approved and all that stuff. So we are trying very, very hard to make that delay as small as possible, though. So thanks for bringing that up. I will definitely bring it up with the team as well. All right, so finally we have the artifact registry. So the artifact registry is an interesting thing. So what that does is it actually holds your Docker images at Google for Cloud Run to use while it's running, right? So it will, if you create a Cloud Run instance, which we're going to do here in just a minute, you can select a Docker image from the artifact registry to use. Now, that might make you think, oh, well, if I push a new version into the artifact registry, that'll get picked up and automatically start running in Cloud Run. You would think so, but no, that's not the way that it works. You will have to actually do a new release, and when you do that, that will go and pull into, like, there's like a cache type of thing that Cloud Run uses to spin up its images, simply because it's much faster than having to go out and get something from elsewhere. So just keep that in mind. I got bit by this actually when I was doing this, because I changed something. And I'm like, why did my code change? And I realized, oh, because I have to go in and I have to actually select the new image. And I'll show you how that works. So Abdul says, alternately, CF supports client scope, and you can use this to manage sessions without using session scope, and they can be stored in your application database. Very true. Yes. Yeah, and if you're making a connection to an external database somewhere to pull those in, that should work. You just have to be a little careful about making sure that people are staying logged in, and any authentication objects are like maintaining state and things like that. So it can be a little bit of a thing. I feel, in my opinion, Cloud Run is great for like microservices, things like quick things like essentially like Lambdas or Azure function style things using CF. It's a great place for that. If you just need to go out, bang, 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 do some kind of, get a return for your application from somewhere that can scale, especially, it's a great option. All right. Okay. So let's figure out how to get GCP to actually talk to Docker, because this is a big sort of like, well, I've got Docker running, but how in the world do I, get that over to GCP? And here's how you're going to do it, right? So the first thing you need to do, the easiest way to start off, is you need to download and install the command line interface for GCP. It's free. That's the link, cloud.google.com, SDK docs install. We'll show you how to do it. There's a link in there. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use it in PowerShell. So there isn't like an app that shows up. It just adds the functionality of the Google CLI to your terminal. And actually it adds it, at least on Windows, both to just like the regular old terminal, CMD, as well as PowerShell. So you can use it kind of wherever you want, which is pretty cool. Now, this is big right here, and this one was kind of a pain, and it may or may not affect you, which is why it's sort of a little bit tricky. So if you go and you just, you download, you install GCP, and then you go and you try to do, gcloud auth login, you may hit a snag, and it may say you are not allowed to run scripts on this machine. So that happened to me. Now I am on an Adobe machine that has a certain security profile and protocol that's put in, right? You may not be under the auspices of that, especially if you run your own business or whatever. It kind of depends on the security settings and all that. However, the nice thing is you can actually get around it. So wait a minute, hold on, wrong one. Boop. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Oh, you know what? Why is this all? Eh, 1 second. Let me just go ahead and open a new terminal. Poof. There we go. Okay. So, and what this is called, it's the execution policy on your machine. Okay. And the way you can find out what it is even before you start anything is you can go in, install. Well, you don't even need to install GCP because this has nothing to do with Docker. This has nothing to do with Google. This all has to do with your local machine. So you're just gonna say get dash execution policy, and it's gonna return a word. Okay, and that word in my case is unrestricted, and there's a bunch of different levels that you could have. So it could be all signed, it could be local signed. There could be all kinds of restrictions on it. Now, unrestricted means that you can literally just run any script that you want. Is that possibly a security risk? I will leave that to you. I have it set that way because I get less headaches that way, right? Now, the way that you would do this is you would use this. So you would use set execution policy dash execution policy and then the policy name. And like I said, there's a variety of them. I'm not actually sure what would happen if I tried to set it to restricted. Yeah. Yeah, it's like you're trying to like set something that's already set, I think. It's interesting. Access to the registry key is denied. Oh, of course, right, because I have to be running as administrator. Sorry. You also have to be running as administrator. So an additional sort of pain in the butt. Again, if you're on a work machine that doesn't allow you to run as administrator, this can be a little bit of a blocker. So you'll have to work with your admins to grant you some kind of rights to run scripts. So sorry about that, but that is kind of a limiting feature. Okay, so what we're going to do here to start off with is we're going to say gcloud auth login. Now, I guess I'm getting the cart is in front of the horse here because to have this work, you actually need a Google account. So I'm assuming you have a Google account and you've signed up for Google Cloud with your account. So you've gone to cloud.google, you've logged in, you've said, hey, I want to use this, right? So now you have authentication to that. So what's going to happen is I'm going to hit that and it's going to open a browser for me. I guess you could see this. I don't know why it would matter. I'm not typing in my password or anything. I guess you can see my username, so don't hack me. But so I'm going to say that's the account. It's going to ask you if you want to allow it to do stuff. And there you go. So now you're authenticated. All right. So next, what we're going to do and by the way, there's a little bit of info here that kind of shows you. So some of the things that you're going to do is you're going to have like a project that you're going to be working in. So this is going to show you what your current project is set to. That's very important. If you have multiple projects, this can like cause all kinds of headaches because you can be trying to push up to something where it's a different project and you haven't set your permissions correctly. And it's not going to throw the error that you think it's going to, because why would it? That would be far too easy. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually authenticate Docker. So we're going to say gcloud auth configure Docker. So we're going to configure Docker to kind of realize that gcloud exists. And it's going to go in here. And there you go. So now it's got a little bit of a warning, but don't worry about that. It added credentials for all of your GCR repositories, and they're going in here. Now, of course, I've done this before. So it's saying, the credential helpers are already registered correctly. So it's like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this again? But that's fine. So then what you want to do is you're going to want to create a repository. Okay. Now I'm going to give you. Actually, not going to do this because I have my repos already set up. I don't want to mess them up, but I'm going to put this in here so it's recorded so that later you can like pause here and look at what it looks like when you do this. So the way it looks is gcloud artifacts repositories create. Then you're going to put in the repository name that you want. Repository names must be letters, numbers, or hyphens. So actually this one would crash because underscores are not allowed. And they must start and end with a letter or number. They cannot start or end with a hyphen. So that's the rules. And then the format is Docker. The location is going to be set to the region that you're in. Okay. So obviously this works exactly the same way as it might in, for example, AWS, right? They have different regions that all their servers are put in. I tend to use US-East 1. That's just where I kind of go because it's the cheapest. To be quite honest, I'm just cheap. US Central 1 is also about as cheap. It's about the same type of thing. So you can use that as well. And then you can add the description of what this is. And I think the description is optional, but it's helpful. It's kind of useful, right? So what'll happen is when you do this and you create the repository, that's going to create a repository here in your artifact registry. So you can see at a point in the past, I actually did this. I ran that code, and it actually, well, we'll get to the point where it actually creates this. But I created a repo name called GCP ColdFusion 23. This is what we're going to be using today. All right. So what we want to do though, so that'll create the repo. So that'll actually create that repo the way that I did it. But now what we need to do is we now need to actually push our app up to this repo so that we can use it inside of Cloud Run. All right. So the way that goes is you're going to actually use Docker for this. Sorry, wrong. Oh, did I close? No, here. Okay. So I'm going to get rid of that because I don't want to create a new repo. So you're going to say Docker tag and the name of your app. So GCP demo app, you remember earlier I built this, right? So you have to have this image built. Okay, so make sure that you build it before. Then you're going to tag it with the repo name. So essentially what you're doing here is you're saying that US East 1, so East 1 is that's the region that you want to be in, -docker.package dev / your project name. My project name is GCP ColdFusion. Your repo name that you just created, GCP Docker CF. Although I thought it was 23. Did I screw that up? I might have screwed that up. And then the name of your image, right? So that tags it locally. Now that does not actually push it up. And this is something, and maybe I'm doing this wrong, but I had lots and lots and lots of issues doing this in any other way. So if anybody actually knows a better way to do this, please let me know. So now you actually have to force Docker to OAuth authenticate into GCP. And this is the way that I figured out to do it. Basically, I'm just passing an OAuth access token through the CLI. And it's going to give me a big warning about don't use passwords and it's insecure and blah, blah, blah. It's bad. But you know what? That's okay. login succeeded. So now that works. So now I'm going to push. Remember earlier I tagged this. So now I'm going to Docker push that up to my repo. And there you go. And so now what we have is if I go in here and I drop into here, I've got GCP demo app. And there you go. And so these are all the versions that I've sort of done, although there is not one. That's interesting. You know, I think when I tagged it wrong, one second. I think I tagged it wrong earlier. GCP ColdFusion, GCP Docker CF. Yeah, I think that's supposed to be, one second. Let me fix this. GCP Fusion 23. Yeah, I think that's why. All right, so if I go ahead and tag that, that should tag it. Now I can log in. Yes, we know it's bad. Bad mark. Okay, and now I can push. And theoretically, if this works, great. If not, I'm moving on. Now there should be something that says, all right, I don't know why this is not showing me the latest. Hold on. Why is this not working? Yeah, I'm not sure why that's not working. I'll get back to you on that. But anyway, that's basically the process. You just have to make sure you're. I think my repo names got a little mixed up here. So anyway, I'm going to move on because I'm only, oh my gosh, I'm 12 minutes from the end. Eee. All right. So I'm going to move to Cloud Run real quick here, just to kind of show you how to get this running and get this working and all that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to edit this thing that I have running already, because editing is exactly the same. When you say edit and deploy new revision, it's the exact same things that you're filling out as when you created. So that way I know that things in here are the correct things. So the first thing that you'll do, actually, let me move my. So what you're going to do here is you're going to grab a container image. And the way that it's going to do this is it's actually going to go to the artifact registry, and you'll see that you've got a project, and you've got your image, you've got your app, and then you're going to choose which of the ones that you want to use in here, and you're going to select that one. Okay. Now then you're going to actually set the port for the container. Now, as you know, ColdFusion's looking on port 8500. So that's what you want to set this to, so that it's actually going to pass things in. The nice thing here is like the base port for this containerized workload is just going to be 80. So it's actually doing the mapping for you automatically, which is really, really nice. Now, here's a few things that you're going to have to decide on how you want to set this up, because it will change the costs of these containers, right? So you can say that CPUs are only allocated during request processing, right? Now that slows things down potentially, but it's also cheaper because you won't be charged for the whole life cycle of when the thing's going. As I mentioned earlier, anytime a request stops, the CPU begins to go into like a cool shutdown mode without killing the thing completely. During that cooldown mode, you're actually not paying for the CPU. What you can actually do is say the CPU is always hot as long as that instance exists. Okay, that makes things faster, it's more responsive, but it's also significantly more expensive down the road because you're actually using CPU seconds. And that's something to keep in mind. So this actually has a free pricing tier based on the number of vCPU seconds. And those seconds need to be divided by the number of CPUs that you're using, right? So if it's up all the time while your workloads are going and you have a bunch of CPUs, you're going to burn through those free seconds and also then start racking up the prices on other stuff. So that's just something to keep in mind. Speaking of CPUs, you can set up the capacity here, like what you want this to look like. I found that 2 CPUs with 8 gigs is like a Ferrari. Like this runs it super, super great. I don't get any timeouts. It's just a great setup. It's a little more expensive. You could probably get away with lowering this a little bit, but just for the sake of the demo, just to make sure it works well and all that, we're going to go ahead and do that. Now, I set the request timeout to be a ridiculous amount, just for my own amusement. Again, make sure that your request timeouts are set to the correct thing based on your workload. So if your stuff is taking a while, you can set this to be longer. Again, if it's up longer, potentially the cost might be higher. So keep that in mind. And then the maximum concurrent requests per instance. Now, this is very important. So what this allows you to do is control how many instances are spawned by the number of requests that are coming into where you're at. Now, this can be as little as 1. So basically, you could spawn a new Cloud Run instance with every single request that comes up. So if you've got something that just does one thing, then potentially you could do it that way, or you could have it set up a different way, right? Now that's concurrent requests. So keep that in mind. Concurrent means at the exact same time. So this could be much lower and still handle a fair number of people coming in. And the execution environment. So this one is a little bit of a mystery to me. I've been using the 2nd generation because it just seems to work a little bit better. But of course, you could use either the default or first. 1st generation apparently is a little bit faster off the line. And then the auto scaling. So I mentioned earlier, this scales just as needed with all of your workloads. And so you can set the maximum number of total instances here that it will spawn up. Now, why is that important? Well, because your wallet is going to take the hit. If you put this at a maximum number of instances of 1,000 and you get a massive set of workloads coming in, you could potentially have 1,000 instances running, which would be kind of expensive maybe. But hey, who knows? Maybe you need that, right? So they give you the opportunity to do that. Very, very important. The minimum number of instances, that can be 0, and that's cheaper, right? So if everything is completely dead in the water and 0 instances are going, you're paying no money whatsoever at all. If you have that set to 1, I believe you're still not paying as much, but there is a little bit of a cost that's just sort of very slowly trickling out. So again, I wish Aaron was here. He could actually answer that question. But again, keep in mind, like this is there's really dangers here potentially about paying money, if you set this up wrong. In fact, I ended up my first time through here, I set these to be the wrong settings. And in a week, I racked up like a $30 bill just playing. It wasn't even a workload. I was just in there like messing around and putting workload containers up and, like stress testing them a little bit. So definitely kind of keep your eye on that. Now, you can pass environmental variables in through here, by the way. So if you don't have a Docker file that sets the environmental variables, you can actually manually set them here, especially if you just like wanted to see how, what the performance might be of like a base install of CF or something like that, or you just want to try it out. And you just want to make sure that the accept EULA gets put in without having to do like, make your Docker file, do the build, push the build, all that. You can do that here. So there you go. You can use secrets. That's actually a nice little feature that they have here. That way for if you have connectors, for example, to Firestore or any of the other GCP stuff, you can actually set up a secrets thing outside of your code and reference that. So that's a nice way to be a little bit more secure. So you're not like pushing up files with your secrets in them, because that's bad. bad news if you want to do that. Anyway, okay. So there you go. There's a few other options, but I'm going to go ahead and deploy this. And as you saw, it gets going pretty fast. And you're going to see this revision comes up pretty darn fast. So it is actually going up there, and this is going to be live in a couple seconds, theoretically. That's going to make me a liar. Come on, Google. You can do it. Boom, so it's built. Now it's doing the auto routing of traffic. So this is kind of a neat feature. And there it is. So now if I take this and I put this in a new window, maybe. Let's compile, I guess. We should see the moose. And there's the moose. Ta-da. Okay, so that's running in Cloud Run. Now I have, oh my gosh, I only have 4 minutes. So I am going to very quickly show you guys the information for GKE, and GKE is a little bit more complex. So let me kind of go through and show you how to do that. Okay. So the way that you set up GKE is a little bit different than Cloud Run, unfortunately, and it is a little more complex. So I'm just going to run through here. So this is in the recording, so you guys can go back and kind of follow the steps more easily later if you want to do that. Again, you're gonna search for Kubernetes engine. You're going to click on it, and more than likely it won't be enabled. So you'll click enable for this project, and then there's going to be a button that says create new cluster. So there's clusters and workloads, and you can think of it as the clusters are the places that your stuff is getting deployed to. The workloads are the containers that are deployed to those clusters. So follow the wizard. I just did all the defaults, and that seemed to work just fine. Now, going back to your local code, right? So you're going to go into the directory in which your code is found, and you're going to do a build, but it's going to be a little bit different than you did before. So you were going to use gcr.io. You're going to go ahead and say docker build -t. That's the tags. You're going to tag this, and you're going to say gcr.io, name of your project, name of your image, and then you can add a tag. And I think this is optional, but I just added like V1. So :V1, you can change those tags, and those tags will show up in the image list so they can help you pick the correct one. And then, very important, space dot, the dot. That's going to take the contents of the current folder and tag them all as this image and build it, right? So then you're going to say docker push gcr.io, GCP ColdFusion, GCP demo app with the same tag. Make sure everything is spelled the same. All of that is the same. And then you're going to actually create a new deployment using this tool called Kubectl. I don't know what that stands for. It's a silly word. You're going to say create deployment, the name of your deployment, and then you're going to identify the image that you just tagged. Make sure it's all spelled the same. Now, what's going to happen more than likely is you will get a little warning that says that the Kubectl, what happens if you forget the dot in the Docker build? It'll error. It'll error out and say, I don't know what you're doing, basically. Because it doesn't know where to build from. So yeah, you figure out very quickly that you've done something wrong. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell you what you did wrong. It just says, hey, something happened here. But often now I've just sort of gotten the habit when something goes wrong, I'm like, did I forget the dot? Oh, kube control. Thank you. Gobi knows what it's for. So kube control, which I just learned is the name of it, is being deprecated. Some of the engines that run it are being deprecated on GCE side GCP side, and they have a new version. And so you're going to get this little like warning about using it, where it's going to ask you to go ahead and install a new version. Go ahead and do that. I don't think it actually changed anything. I think it still actually just did everything I needed to. So when you do that, what that's going to do is it's going to actually take your Let me go ahead and go in here. So as you can see, this is my cluster. My cluster is autopilot cluster 1 because I just followed the wizard and they named it autopilot 1, which whatever, that's cool. And then what that deployment is going to do, you can see the name. I actually kept the name my deployment just for fun. It's going to deploy my deployment into a workload. Awesome. So now this is actually a container and it's running inside of GKE, but you can't get to it, unfortunately. So what you do have to do at this point is under the service details, and this is not showing up in mine because I've already done this, but under service details, if you click into it and scroll down, there'll be a button that says expose, and I think it's under the network detail portion of it. And when you click expose, there will be the option to add a load balancer endpoint that lets you map from a port to another port. Very easy. There's only like a couple of different spots there. And you just say port 80 to port 8500, go, and ta-da, you're running CF in a GKE cluster behind a load balancer. It's very easy to set up. And then that way, when you add more things in there, the load balancer can actually go and pick the right thing. It can load balance all your workflows and have multiple containers going. It's pretty neat and very powerful. Okay, so we are 2 minutes over time. Apologies for going long. I am just going to keep going because I have to show you this VM thing. It is bonkers. Apologies for folks. This is being recorded, so if you have to go, I totally understand, and I still love you. You're still invited over to hang out with me at CF Summit. Well, I'll buy you a drink at the bar at the pool when we have our party. But for those of you that can stay, this is going to be sort of fun. Okay, so how do you do the VM version of this? Okay, so you're going to go ahead and enable Compute Engine for your particular project. Again, just search for Compute Engine, click it, hit enable, and it'll enable it for you. And then you're going to hit create new VM. That's going to be right at the top. In fact, I can show you what that looks like right here. So this is Compute Engine, starts off in VM instances, create instance. Easy as that, right? You're going to create it, and you're just going to kind of go through and set all the basic settings in it the way that you normally would, except for one big thing here, and I'll show you where that is as it's doing its thing. So you're going to set things like regions, right? Your zones. You're going to set what the machine configuration is going to be. And right here, this puppy right here, this is the secret sauce. Deploy a container image to this VM instance. Right. So how do you do that? So the way you're actually going to do this is right here at the top, it says container image. And you're like, wait, what? Where do what do I pull that from? So the place you actually pull it from is you're going to use the same gcr.io address as you did for GKE, right? So here, your gcr.io, right? GCP ColdFusion, GCP demo app, v1. This address will work as the container for this image because you've pushed it up to GCR already. It's up there. So you're good to go, basically. Just make sure somebody cube control. And okay, sorry. Container, use the same address, and you're going to go ahead and hit create VM. So that's going to go through and it's going to churn and churn and churn. It's going to create a new virtual machine for you. It takes a minute, right? Because this is like a full-blown VM, right? With all the trappings of a VM, right? But then what do? You're kind of stuck because you have a thing running. It's a VM, but there's like no way in or out of it, right? So this is what I was talking about. Like you are sort of under the auspices of all the limitations of a VM. You have to set all these things up yourself manually, which is not super hard. It was just kind of a pain in, the back end, unfortunately, to set it up. But I'm going to go here and show you. I'm going to drill into my instance that I've got. And what you're going to do here is you're going to, hold on. Shoot, where is the, they definitely, here we go. So under the network interfaces for your instance, you're going to drill down and under firewall, what you want to do is you're going to actually create a firewall rule for your instance. And what that's going to do is, and I named it allow external. And so what this does is it allows you to say for any IP address, that's what 0.0.0.0/0 means. Any address coming in, go ahead and allow ingress on TCP port 80. So that's important. So that's going to allow someone to come in and hit your VM from the outside, literally anyone. Now, if you wanted to limit this to just some IPs or an IP range that you're like doing development work, or you only want it to come in from one area, you can absolutely do that. So cool. So now it's coming in on port 80. And guess what's going to happen? It's going to hit port 80 and then not know what to do because your ColdFusion is running on port 8500. So then what you need to do is you actually are going to need to go in and you're going to SSH in to your VM. So obviously this needs to be running before you can do this. So you need to give it a minute for it actually to spin up. And this is the madness. This is the, what are we doing with our lives here? So what's nice is this actually keeps all your, it goes in, it actually authenticates you using all of your stuff kind of automatically. And now you are running. So this is my VM. Now I'm in an SSH window. And anything, if you're comfortable with SSH and know what to do with it, this is one way to get in and actually do some control over your environment, which is awesome. It's a very easy way to get in. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to say sudo iptables -t nat -a pre-routing -p, a lot of dash letters here, TCP dport 80 -j redirect to port 8500. Now I'm already doing this, so I actually don't know. Yeah, I guess that works. So now, theoretically, if I go back to my VM instance, the external IP is here, 35193.230. And if I do that, the moose is loose. There it is. So now that is ColdFusion in Docker running on CloudFront, or it's not CloudFront, Cloud Run in GKE, and in a very odd container running in a VM way. That's my talk. Apologies for going 10 minutes over. Does anyone have any questions? I am assuming there's about a million questions because this went really, really, really fast. Yes, Charlie, that's exactly what I was talking about. Awesome CF Compose. Yeah, there you go. Sure. Yeah, L, I can, here, let me just see. Let me grab that line. So this is the line that you would type to when you're SSH'd in. Now, also something to know about IP tables and setting this up, this will not maintain state across VM restarts. Okay, so there is a tool that you do need to install, and it's a little bit outside of the scope of this talk because it's a Linux thing. It's not a, it's a totally separate thing for running like IP table. It's like an IP table package that needs to be installed that will keep that state past a VM reinstall. But you can, you can chat GPT or Google it. Just ask it how to maintain state of an IP table change. So awesome. Yes, very good, Charlie. Thank you. So Charlie is sharing here some of the other talks that he has done. Charlie's done a lot of them. Lot of yes, and also David Byers is another person. Actually, I was chatting with David a little bit over the last few days when I was trying to debug a couple of the issues I was having with Docker. So really great resource there as well. Awesome. Let me just make sure that I want to make sure I didn't miss any questions. Nope, none so far. Would apps deployed in Cloud Run be able to make external calls, data pull from external DB or SMTP connection? Yes, Gobi, absolutely. So things running in Cloud Run have the ability to go out and make any connections that you want to, as long as those connections are available. So, if something's firewalled or like it's a local thing, keep in mind it's still running in the cloud, right? So there are network settings that you can set. You can set up like, local virtual sort of areas to keep things secure inside of an area, and Cloud Run can run inside of that. But for the most part, in fact, actually, when I was running this thing, this is actually making a GraphQL call out to Google Sheets, which is not inside of the Google Cloud like environment. Like I'm actually going outside of that and then coming back into the Google thing. So yeah, absolutely. You can make all kind of connections. You can make DSN connections to things. You can set up a data source to connect to databases. You can do all that. So yeah, definitely. And we definitely want to see you. Thank you. Yeah, we want to see what you all do with Cloud Run, because Cloud Run is kind of a unique, interesting thing. Mark, yeah, see you in Vegas. It'll be fun. Yeah, it's one of those very odd little products that that Google has come out with that I think maybe potentially has a lot of fun things that creative programmers might be able to do. Um, maybe making workloads that wouldn't work elsewhere with versions of ColdFusion that are usually not used for production uses, maybe, possibly, I don't know. But it's up to you guys to try it out and check it out and see what you can do with it. And yeah, build some stuff. We want to see it. I'm excited to see. Yeah, and everyone, by the way, hopefully you are signed up for CF Summit this October. It is going to be an absolute blast. We are expecting a huge number of people. We're sorting through nearly 200 speaker requests for people to speak. We have just a record number of folks that are excited in doing talks there. We're going to have about 30 talks across 2 days, plus a training on the third day. If you want to get your certification to be an Adobe certified professional in Adobe ColdFusion, you can come and do that. It's a great test, and it kind of shows off your capabilities. And you get a little badge that you can put on LinkedIn to make yourself fancy, which is fun. So yeah, it's definitely hope to see you there. I will obviously be there in whatever crazy outfit I decide to get before then. So I'm shopping right now. Yes, the certification is the same as last year's, Mark. So if you got your cert last year, it is the same. It hasn't really changed. The only thing that's different is if you got your training in, I think, 2016, maybe, or 2018, when it was called the Specialist. The ColdFusion Specialist is a totally different training, significantly easier to get. This new one is much more of a challenge. So if you went in and passed and got that, congratulations. It's definitely not 100% pass rate. Just gonna throw that out there. So if you made it, you did well. Awesome. I didn't distinctly mention that, Charlie, but thank you for mentioning it. Cough. And by the way, everything that you're seeing is running in developer mode. You'll notice that I never at any point put a serial number into any of these. So indeed. Now remember, developer mode is limited to three IPs. So keep that in mind. So for example, in GKE or on the VM, that would limit you to the number of people able to hit it. So keep that in mind. Awesome. Well, if anybody has any other questions down the road, let me go ahead and pull up my end thing here to make sure that it's in the recording so you can get a hold of me. My email is always open to Takata@adobe.com. So please feel free to email me any questions you have, any comments, any ideas. If you have a great idea for improving the technical aspects of ColdFusion, new language features, integrations you'd like to see, library updates, new fonts, I don't know, a new logo with like a little cat jump. Anyway, anything, just send it over. I'd be happy to pass it on to the correct teams inside, whether that's the product team or the engineering team, anything along those lines. My GitHub is Mark R. Takata at github.com. So a lot of my code is in there. I think the code for Sloppy Moose is already up there somewhere. I'm not sure if I put it in there, but it's a pretty basic piece of kit. So you could figure out how to run that yourself pretty easily. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I am very, very active on LinkedIn. And I would love to connect with you all. David asked, where will this recording be posted for download? Would love to review this. So it will be, oh my gosh, my mouse is like, hello. Oh, this is really interesting. There we go. Sorry. I don't know why that did that. Okay, it's going to be /Adobe. This should really be in the links, but I'm just going to go there. So https youtube.com/Adobe ColdFusion in the videos section. It will be posted there as soon as it's been processed and uploaded. And by the way, we heard you all loud and clear about the quality of the previous recordings. And we have actually updated and upgraded Connect, which is the tool that you're in right now, viewing this, to allow the use of an HD format and HD quality recording. So this is the first recording I've done at that higher quality, and I would love to hear back from you whether you prefer this and you like this level of recording. And I don't feel like I've had much issue with with the bandwidth of it at all. So hopefully you all have not had that issue either. Oh, okay, and I'm done with my. Let me go ahead and put this back up. There you go. I don't know why that went away. There you go. And of course, I'm on CFML Slack. So if you are all on CFML Slack, you can find me there as Mark Takata Adobe. And if you're not on CFML Slack, you can go ahead and go into the Some Useful Links portion here and click Join CFML Slack and go there. And it's free. and there's a big community there. Lots of people, people asking questions, people making suggestions, people complaining about stuff. Which is why I'm there. I'm there to listen. That's what I'm here for. All right. Fantastic. Well, thank you all for coming. If there's no more questions, I'm just going to go ahead and slowly sort of take things down here. It's been a pleasure showing you all of this cool new stuff that's in GCP. It's a really fun place to play in. I highly recommend going and checking it out. Definitely a little bit different of a way of doing things than what you might be used to in AWS or even Azure. But for the most part, if you do the things that I said to do in this talk, you will get running and you'll have a workload that you can play with and do things in a cloud. You can also take a lot of the things that I've done here and apply them to, for example, AWS or even Azure. Some of the ways that you connect obviously are going to be different, but things like building out your custom installs and all that, those are going to be the same no matter where you end up going. So awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to